previous role, I was with Devon County Council as Chief Bridge Engineer for many years, and I joined WSP last year on a part-time basis, and I've got involved with the revision, or rather the refresh, of the inspection manual. This is the original pair of documents. Volume 1 on the left, Volume 2 on the right was the inspector's manual. I've shown them both as the same size there, but actually the inspector's reference book was an A5 book. And I've got to say, from my experience, when these documents came into my office in 2007, Volume 1 tended to get a little bit of dust and sat there. Volume 2 went out with the bridge inspectors. And I had 40 engineers and technicians in my office, and we didn't really understand the full content of Volume 1, what was in there. It really is an excellent document. The refresh has made it slightly better. So I would recommend to you, if you have any trainee bridge inspectors or even inspectors out there who need a bit more experience, those going for BICS qualification, there's a lot of information in there. It's a really good reference document. So please, if you got the original one, dust it off and start sharing it around the office. So what we're required to do, National Highways employed WSP to review and carry out a scoping study, which included consultation, 141 individuals. I was one of those individuals, and I was reminded by a colleague of mine that I said I'd like Volume 2 as a separate document, so the bridge engineers could take it out. That isn't the case, which I'll explain in a minute. It's all contained in one document now. The 5 interviews with leaders in the organisation, such as Transport for Scotland, Network Rail, and others. So 6 major recommendations came back from the survey. Update and refresh the manual's content. Improve the defect images and include most common defect scoring systems and codes. I've highlighted that one because that is what the majority of the responses required. They felt that particularly the images in the handbook could be better. Not just the quality of the images, but sometimes the context of the photographs were there. If you actually have a look at that document, you couldn't really see where it was in the structure. It made sense to the person who took the photo at the time, but not necessarily the reader of that document. Recommendation 3, restructure as a user-centric document, publish in hard and digital formats, enable future advancements in bridge management, and future-proof for developments in inspection technology. Those 4 can sort of be lumped together in the fact that it's going to be a digital document in future. There won't be a hard copy issued, but you will be allowed, obviously, to download either the whole document or just Volume 12 if you want that for your bridge inspectors. So, improve the defect images. Some of the quality of the original photographs weren't great, so we've tried to improve those. And you'll see it actually looks better in the document than it does on that screen. It's not quite as washed out as that one. This is a severity 5 where an inverter has completely disappeared. And here, a severity 4 for potholes. I had a discussion with National Highways about how much we should be trying to suggest what a cause could be. And that isn't the intention of the book, because you can only tell from a photograph. You don't necessarily get the full context of what's happening there. But here, a pothole on a bridge deck is probably down to waterproofing failure. You've only got a thin surface across there, 100 to 200 millimeters. And in this case, because this is one in Devon, I know it is the failure of a waterproofing system. We're not doing that for every defect that we show, but there are a few in the documents which will give a probable cause. So we need to include defect scoring system, and hopefully most of you are familiar with this. It's 1 to 5 severity scoring. We haven't put any photographs of 1 in there of good. We felt we were looking for defects. National Highways may decide they want some 1s put in there, but mainly they're 2s, 3s, 4, and 5. And for each of the defects, we've tried to get at least a couple of the severities in there. Some of them have got a full range of 2, 3, 4, and 5, which I'll show you some photographs later on, which will help explain that. We wanted to see the codes as well, and this is the format that you'll find in each chapter. There'll be a table for each defect, and on the right-hand side, coloured there, you've got the National Highways Code, and then you've got the Bridge Condition Indicator Code underneath. So we needed examples of defect scoring system. Here we've got a severity 2, and here's another one where we put a probable cause down. Failed expansion joint stroke waterproofing. You can see here it's a leaf pier of a multi-span simply supported structure. There is water coming down onto the structure. It's shown as a severity 2 because this is actually looking at waterproofing. Fact is, it may have a bigger impact on that structure later, but it's only reported to what that element is seen to be at that time, which is severity 2. I'm going to come back to that one later on. The previous document was probably heavily loaded towards the strategic highway network. We've included a lot more local authority type structures now. Transport Scotland certainly have a lot more so than National Highways. It was quite difficult to get new photographs from the industry. Cornwall supplied quite a few, and this is one of theirs, a retaining wall with a severity 4 scoring because it's been severely undermined. A severity 5, this is a crack of a structure, that element has clearly failed. Now going back to that leaf pier that I showed you, severity score is applicable to the element, not a consequence of another defect. So whilst this was given a severity 2, further along that structure where this has happened, there's indication of what the water falling onto the face has done to the element. This is now a severity 3 because we've got spoiled concrete. I'm showing this because this document has got a great deal of benefit to anyone wanting to train up or to refresh themselves or train up new inspectors. You could actually look at some of these structures, some of these defects, and actually have a discussion with them. Have they seen this? Do they realise what that is likely to cause later on? And this is the same structure. So that is caused because there's a leak from above. The leak from above has created that. The leak is coming because the plug joint has failed. There's a severe crack down there and water is penetrating down onto the bridge deck. These are only a few examples of the 227 photos that are now in that manual, but it's pointing out, if you like, how this manual can be a benefit to you training inspectors. And anyone going for their BICS qualifications, there's a great deal of information in here that could be of use to them. We were asked to refocus content to emphasize the importance of recording the change in condition. That is now happening here. I've identified, highlighted there, a description of the defect size, and then record any significant change from the previous inspection. I have to say from experience, it's not something that's always happened. People go to site, and it may be a new bridge inspector. We are supposed to look back at previous inspections. It doesn't always happen. Hopefully this has encouraged senior managers to ensure that this is the case. We need to see the change in condition structures over time. Future-proof developments in inspection technology. I've just put these two in. I'm not expecting you to read this. This is just a description of UAVs and their use. Because it's a digital document, we will be able to, or National Highways will be able to update this in years to come. And particularly, more information can go into this as UAVs are used more in the industry. Further opportunities, improve use. That's going to happen because it's going to be digital, and hopefully with some quick links for you to get to. Update and refresh the content with references. That has happened. There's a lot of references to CS documents and others. Fill in the gaps. Fibre reinforced polymers, weathering steel and BICS. That's now included. There's a section under weathering steel. There's the reference on the top right. That's 2 tells you that it's chapter 2. 78 would be the paragraph that it comes under. 3 is the photograph connected to weathering steel. And there's a whole chapter now, chapter 11, on inspection of fiber reinforced polymers. And then with BICs, there's only 2 statements there, but they are fairly important ones, in that there should be an assurance of inspector's competence can be demonstrated by having independent, quality assured certification. And that can be the Lantra BICs. There are other schemes around and available, and we should be hearing this afternoon more about the update of the Lantra scheme to hopefully ensure more uptake of that, including from the people who are using the alternative schemes. There's the 13 chapters. I'm not going to go through each one, but the main elements are covered from chapter 7, that's concrete, chapter 8, metallic, masonry, timber, and then fibre reinforced. And then chapter 12, as I said earlier, is the inspector's handbook, which can be taken off independently. But these days, a lot of inspectors are using ruggedized laptops and tablets, so they can take this document out with them and refer to it on site, instead of a wet, soggy copy of volume 2. The manual, as I mentioned earlier, is now applicable to the local highway network and its diverse asset types as it is to the strategic highway network. It'll be available to any organisation in the UK who wish to use it. And a few items from the manual. I was going to share the document itself. I'm going to jump on and actually show just a couple of slides with shorter time. The reference I've highlighted down there on the right-hand side is CS450. There's other references in there. This is the layout of the start of the document. Behaviour structures 2. I want to labour this one a little bit. I didn't realise the significance of chapter 2. There is so much useful information in there for everybody, not just for trainee inspectors, but for those of us longer in the tooth who have perhaps forgotten a lot of things. It's a really good reference document. Starts off, it's got quite a few interesting slides in there. Again, for the new inspectors and trainees in the office and young engineers. We often have debate over what part of an element is a retaining wall or wing wall. It's covered in here. Different types of retaining wall structures. This, I think, is going to become a bigger part of the document in years to come. The majority of bridge owners at the moment are spending a large proportion of their budget on retaining wall structures. Down to climate change, we're getting a lot of landslips and failed retaining walls. And I know there's the large 2 southwest area authorities are spending 75 to 80% of their budget on retaining walls from their bridges budget. Just a few examples of rollers there, bearings, different types of, again, this is mainly to the young engineers and the young inspectors to try and appreciate before they go on site what they're actually looking at. There's a small section on retaining walls, and there's even a section there on structural analysis. This is only 1 page, there's quite a bit in there, but I'm just pushing chapter 2. It really is probably, to my mind, the strongest part of the document. Chapter 12, which I was involved in getting new photographs together, it was fairly difficult, so I spent a while driving around Devon getting quite a few extra ones off national highway structures. But thank you for those of you who did supply photos. And as I said, they're not just applicable to the strategic network now. There are local authority type structures, such as these. And this one, again, when you don't see a bridge in the full context, you might question, this is down as an arch bridge string course deformation. We've put this one in, and you have to rely on the person who submitted that is the correct assumption. I don't think it is. The coping is horizontal, and the arches doesn't look deformed, so it may well be. But this is a sort of discussion you can have with the people in the office with the type of photographs that we've got now in there. Another arch bridge showing slight deformation. A typical footbridge failure of a tie beam. There's some timber defects in there, And hopefully you'll see the quality of the photos, and they're much better on the screen and in the document than they are on that screen. It's a bit too blurred out. And again, some more photographs on paint failure systems, and there's quite a bit on wrought iron as well, which there wasn't quite as much previously. So, I think I've rattled through it a bit too quickly, but the manual will be shared with stakeholders, Transport Scotland, Network Rail, National Highways and others, to have another opportunity to comment before finalising the document. So it's not available for you yet, I'm afraid, but it won't be long. National Highways are looking at ways to provide this digitally and to make sure that you've got easy access to links that are contained within that document. Some storage locations being considered include Bridges Owners Forum, which I think is where the original document can still be found now, UK Bridges Board website, and a DEP National Bridges Group website. So that was the original document, and I think the new document is going to be a little bit more local authority structure type centric. It still covers the strategic network bridges, but it's to encourage people to realise that this isn't just for the strategic network, it is for everybody. And the photos at the moment we've got shown on the document look like that, which should be a bit more appealing to the local authority people. And I think I'm out of time, Jose. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We do have time for 2 or 3 questions from the audience, if anyone has anything.
Thanks, Kevin. You can probably hear me from here anyway, but just in terms of defect severity scoring, that's probably one of the more subjective parts of inspections. How did you arrive at the scores? And depending on how you did, were there any sort of differences of opinion?
So how did I what, sorry?
How did you arrive at the scores, the defect severity scores?
The scores are what have been provided to us by people who've done the inspections.
Right.
Yeah, so we haven't scored any of the photographs.
Gotcha.
I don't think it would be, as I said, you need to see a photo in the full context of the structure.
Yeah.
You can't look at something and actually say that is severity. So the photos that have been provided came with the severity score already from the bridge inspector.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting presentation. I run a bridge inspector's training course at Sheffield Hallam University, and one of the things that we ask at the end of the course is, was there anything difficult for you on the course? Because we get a lot of variation on the delegates. Some will have the academic background and they'll have that structural appreciation, others won't have that. And if you tie this into the previous presentation about the understanding structural failures, how do we ensure that all the bridge inspectors will have that structural appreciation? Because in the manual itself, you mentioned 1 page of structural analysis, but in a training course, you'd expect them to, okay, we can introduce it, but they won't know what shear force diagrams and bending moment diagrams are. How can we make sure that those people are properly trained, that they can understand and appreciate how serious a defect can be?
I think you have to take into account that we have 2 types of bridge inspectors. As you know, you've got a general inspector and a senior inspector. How much do you need the general inspector to understand? And I have to say from experience, there's a lot of inspectors around the country who are not bridges experts. They're highways people who are carrying out bridge inspectors. If we can get people onto one of your courses at the general inspection level, I don't see the need to understand the full structural analysis of a bridge, how a bridge particularly works. The basic elements, I think, are covered in there, which would be adequate. For somebody going for senior bridge inspector, obviously you expect them to know a lot more about it, and it's really difficult for, especially local authority people, to send their people on training courses due to the costs. But hopefully this document and chapter 2, if it is pushed, will provide a lot of the information that people need. I don't know if anybody else wants to. John, you got anything? Not really add to that. Sorry. Does that really doesn't really answer your question, I don't think, 'cause
Yeah, it's probably a question and a comment in there, and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
based on my experiences of
Yeah.
of being with these bridge inspectors, because again, it's understanding a crack is a crack, but is it a structural crack? Is it showing distress, or is it a shrinkage crack? And it's trying to understand the difference between the two. One could be a severe structural distress crack, and the other one may not be. And
Okay.
again, if they don't appreciate that, and they don't really highlight that in the report, then the senior inspector back at base may not have the information to make that decision.
If I can put my Devon County Council Chief Engineer hat on, not speaking as WSP, the 5 bridge inspectors I had who did all the generals, and they helped with dive inspections, rep accidents, whatever, if they found anything they weren't sure of, they would come back and take it up with a senior engineer, not necessarily a bridge inspector, a design engineer, and talk it through. We were lucky, we had a very large bridge office. There's a lot that don't. So I don't really know if I can answer your question. It's really getting the structure in the organisation to ensure that that happens.
And if I could ask one more question. Arguably the most important table in the original document was table G10, where you've got the descriptions to help the inspector to come up with a severity score. Has that been updated?
I'd have to come back to you on that and have a look. I've got a copy of the whole document here if you want to have a look later on.
Perfect, thank you, yeah.
Yeah. I was only involved in one chapter of it. I have scanned through the whole document, but I couldn't answer that directly. But I've got it on my laptop. If you come to the WSP stand, we'll have a look. Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're slightly overrunning, so can we just have one final question, please? I think here.
The expectation should be that the person or the engineer leading the inspection to be a degreed structural bridge engineer, period. I think the full understanding of the structural behavior, and as the professor said, what kind of crack that is and what's the significance of the crack. Is it a flexural crack or a shear crack, where it is located on the structure, what kind of detail, all these elements. Speaking of the precursors in the previous presentation by Dr. McDonald and Paul Livesey, it's very important to understand the significance of what we're looking at. So if you get an inspector that does not understand the significance of what you are looking at, then it's a precursor for problems, because you might get a report that does not spell what the actual deterioration of the structure is.
Yeah, conversely, I'd say if somebody found a crack and they weren't sure what it was, they shouldn't suggest to anybody they should go and find out. Get some proper support from a more structural senior engineer or more senior engineer. Yeah, I don't think any of my guys doing the general inspections, although 2 of them of the 5 were chartered engineers, they didn't have a lot of design experience. And I wouldn't expect them to make a decision on site as to why there was a crack necessarily. When it comes to principal inspection, that's different. But in this country, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we do principal inspections every 6 years. And that's the sort of level of engineer who should be able to pick up and identify what a cause is.